This is the Pennyworth Podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Pennyworth, Episode 7, Julie Christie.
If she is indeed okay, you have my apologies for coming in hot, so to speak.
Apology, my ass. I'm missing 3 days of my life thanks to whatever it is you slipped into my drink.
3 days? Dear me. I can assure you, Martha, I slipped nothing into your drink.
Perhaps the police can find out.
Martha, I'm sorry you didn't have a good time. I haven't the foggiest notion what happened to you. I'm afraid I wasn't paying attention. It was a good party. And I rather took you for an adult. As for the police, call them by all means. The chief inspector is a dear friend. He'll tell you I'm a good egg.
A good egg.
Martha, let's not make a federal case of this. If Patricia is okay, there's no need to involve the police.
I'll be the judge of that.
Where's the crime here? Sin we have in joyful abundance, but crime, no.
Welcome back, governors. We're back in DC's Batverse with our Pennyworth podcast about the 7th episode of Pennyworth, Julie Christie. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hi there, governors. I am one of your other hosts, John. Yes, we are in the dark dimension of the Batverse. Yeah. The devil, Beelzebub, or Jason Ripper, no matter what you call them, evil lurks the land.
Yeah, back after a week's break for the Labor Day break that they had on Epix for episode 7. So 1 week extra we have. I think it was allowing a lot of people who've subscribed to the channel to watch Pennyworth. They've allowed them to catch up. They did a little marathon of 6 episodes last weekend. So catching up this week. We're recording a little bit in advance. So right now, we're not actually sure if it's airing 2 episodes back to back on Pennyworth tonight on Epix, but we think it's only just the 1 episode, episode 7. If there is a second episode, of course, we will record our thoughts about episode 8 and we'll release them later on in the week. This one is just about episode 7. No spoilers for episode 8, of course. This episode is called Julie Christie. Once again, we've had a little bit of a failure of what the actual episode names have to do with the episodes themselves, but we do know Julie Christie is a massively famous actress from the 60s, a big swinging 60s icon, like many of the other actresses and singers that have been chosen for the other episodes.
Absolutely. And I think at the moment that is what is defining this, is that, look, Pennyworth is set in the 60s, 30 degrees removed kind of thing. So it could be with a mobile phone, or it could be with Victorian era sort of justice practices like the stocks or the swinging baskets of doom. But certainly, yes, Julie Christie, probably best known for Dr. Zhivago. She was in that, but she has also recently been in The Prisoner of Azkaban as well with Harry Potter. So, you know, she has still been involved in the movies industry. So, you know, she had certainly a lot of accolades, from getting an Academy Award to a BAFTA Award, Screen Actors Guild, you name it. She was pretty well known in the 60s when she was acting in some of those iconic 60s movies.
Yes, and we think that's roughly what the connection is here, chosen by Bruno Heller for all of the titles for these episodes. Thanks so much for joining us after the little break that we've had for the week, as we said. Great to have you back. We are once again starting out our podcast with our Royal Mail section, our feedback section for Pennyworth.
Be a love. Put stamps on them. Pop them in a letterbox for me.
You know I can't do that.
You can.
Our first piece of feedback is an email in from the composer of Pennyworth, David Russo. He says, "Dear John and Derek, I am the composer for both Pennyworth and Gotham. Count me among the ranks of the devoted listeners. I've long enjoyed the insight, humour and passion of your podcast, and although I watch these episodes over and over during the course of the season, I'm always surprised by the numerous things that I miss. You two always reveal something about each episode that completely escape my notice. Sadly, I can't shed any light on the question regarding the naming of the episodes. Bruno writes from a mysteriously undisclosed location. What I find much more unsettling, however, is that the pilot episode is merely named Pilot. Keep up the good work. Best, David Russo." Thanks so much, David. That's really nice of you to say.
Yeah, thank you, David, for the comments. Yeah, it is interesting that the first episode is just called Pilot. Maybe it's kind of, well, just in case it doesn't get picked up, I'm not going to waste time thinking up a title for the episode. Because certainly it feels like there's a lot of thought put behind the others with Julie Christie, Cilla Black, at least, linking it to that 60s thing. So yeah, thanks for getting in touch, and a great Pennyworth theme tune here. I have to say I do hum it quite a lot. Yeah.
He really does a lot, and it's been great. I think we saw the first episode back in May, and at the time I think we saw that first episode and that theme tune was just playing over and over in our head, and has been ever since. 4 months on, still singing it. Really enjoy it. I did look it up, and yes, the first episode of Gotham, also written by Bruno Heller and directed by Danny Cannon, was also called Pilot. So I think this just might be a little flair that he has when he's writing the first episode of his shows. He just calls them Pilot, and then when he gets into writing the rest of the episodes, he has something in the back of his head that's coming up with these iconic names for each of the episode. As I said, I think it's just specifically these ones seem to be about 60s iconic heroines for most of the rest of the episodes, but we'll see if there's anything else, anyone else that might be able to shed some light as we go on. I'd love to talk to David about where he came up with the Pennyworth theme tune, because it's a really interesting theme. Was there stuff influencing his choices for that? Was it something like the iconic shows of the 60s, things like, Mission Impossible and
Man from Uncle,
that kind of stuff, because there's definitely little touches in there, but obviously working on Gotham as well with Bruno Heller and Danny Cannon over the years, he has some insight into how the mindset of them as writers is and how they work. So, if you'd be interested in popping onto the podcast, when we finish up these 10 episodes, I think we'd like to get a couple of interviews with some of the cast and people behind the scenes. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. Thank you so much for the feedback, David. It's really good to hear from you and to know that you are one of those on board with the podcast.
Yeah. Our fellow governors.
Exactly. Remember, you can contact us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. We also have some feedback through on our Facebook group as well from Roger Sprong. Roger goes, I just finished listening to your podcast on episode 6. When I first saw Lord Harwood, he was about as far from being a sympathetic character as could be possible. But now I find him a very sympathetic character. I never thought that would happen. Excellent writing and storyline concerning Harwood. I also agree that the fake nose he's wearing now must be much simpler and cheaper for the production. Definitely. However, I was very disappointed in Martha. She agreed to go to that party rather easily, it seems. I know she would have no idea what the party would be like, but she should have kept an eye on Patricia in her apartment. Did she go just to spite Thomas, or did she have little choice because it would have been hard to keep Patricia in the apartment? It's interesting. I think Patricia is very much a party girl. It could even be that she was sent in by those party goers to kind of lure Martha out. I think as we're going to get into this episode, there's certainly something much more around this Aleister Crowley than at least would have first met the eye in the episode 6.
Maybe.
So certainly it could be a little bit of a plant. Who knows?
I think we're supposed to get from Patricia that she just doesn't like being treated as the babysitter, effectively. She's a person who has as much power, I suppose, in her mind in the No Name League as this guy, Thomas Wayne, who she doesn't know a huge amount about. So kind of this idea of him knocking on the door and going, well, you're going to have to take care of my sister while I do some proper business. I think it kind of gets up her nose a bit.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
when they have that moment between the two of them, as Patricia and Martha have that discussion where Martha says, well, I'm an ex-girlfriend and I kicked him to the curb. And then suddenly the two of them are kind of friends because she goes, nobody ever treats Thomas like that. Nobody ever dumps Thomas Wayne, the billionaire kind of thing. So I kind of get the feeling that they created this relationship a little bit very quickly. They fall into that kind of friendship all of a sudden. And then nobody ever asked Martha to go to a party. She's been kind of holed up in her apartment for 6 months, at least with Alfred. When he was holed up in his house, his parents were taking care of him. But Trisha's in a foreign country and doesn't seem to have very many friends. So if this girl comes over from the US and goes, come on to a party with me, maybe she just kind of felt a little bit lonely and felt like going along with Patricia to the party.
Well, and look where she ended up as a result. Naked on Hampstead Heath.
In a field.
In a field, absolutely. Roger finishes off with, I think there's a possibility that the question, who shot Esme, might not be answered this season. In Gotham, Bruce didn't find out who killed his parents until quite a bit of season 2 had been aired. To me, that was a little disappointing, so I hope the answer to this mystery is much more satisfying. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of intrigue around this, around Esme and her shooting, because she was on the screen for such a short time. Alfred actually, I was a little disappointed in Alfred about how potentially he was treating his fiancée at the time, but also then it's to what end is she killed for? Is it simply this current story of Captain Curzon getting back at him for something seemingly quite trivial? So I think it's got to be more than that. And I think we'll come to that a bit in this, discussion of episode 7, but there's got to be a good old cliffhanger here. I think that is resolved, to be honest, around Esme for sure.
I think it's a very difficult thing when you set up a murder and who killed a character. You can either set that up and that be the fundamental linchpin of a TV show. We've seen that with many shows in the past. And I think the way Bruno Heller and Denny Cannon conceived of Gotham was who killed Bruce Wayne's parents is this central case. And then as the show moved on and we got more episodes in a season and all that kind of stuff, and they added in the villains and that kind of thing, suddenly it became, oh, sugar, we've got to get back to explain who it was that killed the parents, and it got to the end, towards the end of season 2, and suddenly you had 44 episodes of a TV show explaining something that was traditionally explained in about 15 minutes of most of the films, who it is that actually killed the parents of Bruce Wayne. So maybe it wasn't that satisfying, but I did see it. I'm not sure whether it's in a further bit of feedback that we've got coming up, but I did see this concept that perhaps the murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne could actually be connected to this time in their lives. Maybe they pissed off somebody in the Raven Society or the No Name League, and that led to their death 20 or 30 years down the line. The plan comes out of that effectively. So you're wondering whether that's what the concept came from for Bruno Heller. So maybe it might not have been satisfying in Gotham to find out who the murderers were, but when you piece it together with this backstory from Pennyworth, maybe it's even more satisfying.
Definitely.
Which I think would be very cool.
Yeah, really good.
Our next bit of feedback came in from Charlotte Bain. She says, I listened twice to your podcast. Loved it. I am upset with Martha going to the party with Patricia. Now, how is she going to get out of being naked and get home? She knows Patricia had partying troubles and she is a stranger. I'm excited about Harwood, Peggy, Beth, and the clan going into London. I am confused why the captain would kill Esme, though. Seriously, putting a note in his house for Alfred to find? It's like he wanted to make Alfred suffer, but to murder Esme. It's like a love-hate infatuation with Alfred. There's real-life stories about delusional stalkers. Now we have to wait, sadly, for a couple of weeks. Okay, hugs and have fun, guys. Thanks very much for that, Charlotte. Yeah, I'm really intrigued to find out a bit more about why the Captain Curzon would kill Esme. I'm sure it's going to be a big point and a big moment. And I'm also wondering whether he is the one that killed Esme. Once again, we have this piecing together of this fractious kind of concept of who it was that killed Esme, but we're still not 100% sure.
I think it's either a complete red herring on the part of John Ripper, or he is being asked to do this by John Ripper. So yes, it's not that he wants to do it. He's being blackmailed or threatened in some way by John Ripper to do this work on his behalf. So that's kind of my take. I absolutely agree. I'm confused why this captain, who really, he did and he didn't appear in those flashbacks to any great extent. Yeah. For me, it was more about Spanish, and his bonding with Bazza and Davy Boy. So I think it feels like, a red herring to me.
Right.
We're supposed to think that maybe it is, but whether it's strong enough to carry that, because as you say, it's the murder of Esme, I think we'll have to see.
Absolutely.
I think it's a little more twisty-turny, duplicitous, potentially here.
And we definitely have some bits to talk about in this episode as well. John, do you want to take the final piece of feedback?
Yeah. Our final bit of feedback also from our Facebook group, Terry Miller. Terry says, I haven't gotten up to episode 6 yet, but I have to commend you guys for this podcast, keeping Pennyworth in the air. I almost lost interest in the idea because there are so many other shows on, and I didn't want another subscription. But you guys plugged along with this, and I finally caught the pilot, and I'm hooked.
Right.
One thing, though, it's funny how you guys are a bit harder on the show than I am. I'll give all the episodes 4 or 5 stars up to now. I wonder if that's because I'm not invested in the Waynes and don't need to see more of them.
Interesting.
I don't like Bruce's dad, and the actors who play them just seem stiffer to me. Are they American? It seems like the actors with British etc. accents are dancing rings around them. To my Oregon ear, they sound fake. Well, you have a good Oregon ear, Terry Miller, because actually the 2 American actors are in fact British actors putting on an American accent. So yes, it may and probably doesn't sound right to a native American speaker with an American accent. And for me, I think they sound neutral, flat American. Absolutely. I don't feel them particularly being bad. But certainly, yes, they are not American.
Yeah, and definitely we're certain about Ben Aldridge, who is definitely British, who plays the character, in that. I know he was in Fleabag, on Amazon, before. That's what I'd seen him before this show. I really like him as an actor personally. And I think what I was saying certainly in the first couple of episodes was the fish out of water idea of having Thomas Wayne involved in this British society, the No Name League, early on in the show just felt really good. And having the idea of him and Alfred working together, just felt like a natural way to lead the show, having, this stiff upper lip British character of Alfred Pennyworth and Thomas Wayne, this billionaire American, working together just felt like a perfect idea. Now throwing in the mix Martha Kane as well, I really like what she brings to the show as well. But I suppose if you're hearing them and you're hearing the voices in your ear and going, they're definitely not American, they're just putting this on, maybe that's distracting you from a bit of that. I will say probably the reason why we're not getting up to the 4 and 5, and I know we have gotten one episode that was over 4 for John's ratings. There was one fundamental issue that we had that has now been resolved. I don't know where you are, but by now you probably have gotten up to episode 6. One of the major fundamental flaws that we found in the show early on was the relationship between Esme and Alfred. We didn't think it worked very well in the show, and it was kind of dragging the show down. But seeing how it's accomplished that storyline and how it's ended that storyline probably has worked quite well for us now. So starting to get into episodes that we're liking a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, I always feel because Thomas Wayne is coming from a very rich family, very, upper class or higher echelons of society in America. I think the stiffness works a bit, actually, for me. But I do know what you mean. It's not kind of relaxed, chilled out in the same way. I think also it's back in the 60s, early 60s with a hint of the 30s in there. Yeah. So, maybe that societal kind of hierarchies and so on still at play here with the Waynes. Dare I say it, maybe they're a bit waspy, in how they are white Anglo-Saxon and Protestant. Who knows? But certainly, I'm hoping that Martha frees him of that a little bit, because I can see that she could do that, for sure.
And I've certainly liked some of the other episodes with them later on in the series as well, so I've really been enjoying the two of them overall.
Yeah, thanks, Terry, and thank you for sticking with Pennyworth on the basis of, at least maybe a few things that we have said. It's really good to hear, because this is a good little show, and I think it's certainly got room to mature and develop for sure. I think it's a good start.
Yeah, and I do kind of feel that Epics know that it's not going to be a show that's going to be widely watched because they're a new channel. I do kind of get that feeling they're allowing the show to do things that it wouldn't do if it was on Fox, or even if it was on the CW. It's doing things that it wouldn't do over on those channels. So it's always intriguing when you've got a smaller kind of audience that you have to talk to, I suppose. Thanks so much for all the feedback. We'll continue to do this feedback section, our Royal Mail section, at the beginning of the episode. So get in all your feedback about each of the episodes as you see them. You can do it on our Facebook group, over on our email at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or join us on any of the groups that we have out there, or on Twitter as well.
Thank you very much, fellow governors, for the postbag there for our Royal Mail section. On with the spoiler-filled review of episode 7, Julie Christie, of Pennyworth. Yes, Derek, what are some of the episode details?
I almost missed it. I had it written in the notes that Bruno Heller wrote this episode. He did not write this episode. The episode was written by Seth Sinclair. This is the first episode of Pennyworth, the first season. First episode not written by Bruno Heller. I've not seen anything that Seth Sinclair has done in the past. I do like that he titled his short movie that he wrote back in 2016 as It's a Wonderful Knife. I think that's quite a good little title for a short movie.
Yes, the wonderfulness of a knife.
It's a wonderful knife.
Yeah. So is that serial killer version of A Wonderful Life?
Perhaps, yes. Definitely involved in lots of murders. Now looking forward to seeing a bit more from Seth Sinclair in the future. The episode was directed by Claire Kilner, a British director, started out directing episodes of EastEnders all the way back in 1998. More recently, she has worked in the DC universe and in the DC prequel universe, I suppose, as you'd probably call Pennyworth. She wrote episode 8 of the final season of Krypton, which just got cancelled, unfortunately, a couple of months ago, but she worked on that final season and directed an episode towards the end of that show.
Excellent stuff, yes.
John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. While Lord Harwood and Peggy Sykes reconnect with the Raven Society and its interim leader Francis Gaunt, Harwood promises her that a revolution is coming to England as he waits to reveal himself at the right time. Also lurking in the shadows is the Satanist Aleister Crowley, who is confronted by Martha Kane and Thomas Wayne as they try to find Patricia and seek answers to Martha's party night and missing days. While Patricia is safe, Crowley wants Wayne's soul for his master, but whilst Thomas finds everything far-fetched, he will do anything for the return of Patricia and wants to meet Crowley's master. But after Thomas releases his inner demons on Jason Ripper and meeting the inner devil in a pale lamplit cellar, they are free to leave. Meanwhile, Alfred and the lads track down the identity of a wanted killer, and an unexpected team-up is on the cards for Alfred after Captain Curzon manages to give him and Bet Sykes the slip.
I have a question for you, John. Have you ever danced with your inner devil in a pale lamplit cellar?
Maybe once, but I think that was the time I woke up naked on Hampstead Heath.
Maybe. I was trying to channel my inner Jack Nicholson there, but I can't do his accent at all. Oh well. I do like it though. Nice synopsis there. Some weird stuff going on in this episode.
This went out there, to be honest, with the old Satanist idea and, an exchange for the soul. Interesting stuff. Yes.
Yeah, but nothing more weird than seeing Jason Ripper in a pink dressing gown, being called love by Aleister Crowley. Like the last time we saw him, effectively, he looked like a kid who was about to murder everybody in sight to try and take care of the landlord's daughter, just in case somebody laid their eyes on his girl kind of thing, even though she didn't want to be his girl, you know? So he's definitely changed, over time.
Jason Ripper's, shall I say, his transformation has been the most shocking of all. And this is why I do feel that John Ripper is at the heart of all of this, because there is part of me going, why is he not out of London like his uncle asked him to, to get him far away from the shame? I think the shame may be that this is how Jason Ripper is. He's a bit more servile than, John Ripper would like. He should be, as a Ripper, he should be the one leading. He should be the one ordering, or it is a plant here, and that the hands of, and the tentacles of John Ripper reach further into this world than maybe we are expected to believe. We know he has a hand with Udine Thwaite, and now I just wonder whether that also extends to trying to manipulate the No Name League through Thomas and Martha Wayne.
Interesting, yeah, but we do see that Ripper is also being called the angel of Aleister Crowley, which effectively would be a demon or a devil, right? Because Aleister Crowley is a Satan worshipper, so an angel to him is also a Satan or a devil as well. So potentially that's still right. Let's get into our questions for the episode. As you know, on episode 7 now, the way we're dealing with Pennyworth is lots of questions about the past of these characters. So we're going to go through all of the questions that came out through this episode. Question 1 for this episode: where was Patricia? Do we find a little bit of information about where she was, what's happened to her in this episode?
Well, we kind of do, really. We see her kind of coming down the stairs and into the room where Thomas and Martha are, where they're asking or demanding from Crowley, where is Patricia? Jason Ripper goes to get her, and she comes down and she's bright, breezy, clean, looks well looked after, happy as Larry, to be honest, to be, in the Crowley Satan residence. Happiest she's ever been, loves to drink blood at lunchtime,
Red wine,
bit of raw flesh, a bit of sous vide, a bit of, bloody meat. She doesn't mind that. So I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? Because again, it's like, to what extent should we be believing what's happening here? Because I do feel this whole thing around the Satanist is very much a Victorian thing as well. I think of Penny Dreadfuls, and I think of that idea of the occult and so on, and that romanticism of that through the Victorian era. And this feels very much of that time period. So Patricia, on the face of it, absolutely fine, doesn't want to leave her newly adopted sort of hotel or residence. Whether that means she's never going back to the US, but I have to say, the one thing I like from here, and I'm glad Martha says it, certainly given some of the Royal Mail that we got back, I'm really glad that Martha really sticks up for herself here, and tells Thomas, look, I'm not her babysitter at all.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering where I've been, why I've lost 3 days of my life. And she is an adult. She can be wherever she wants. And I think this dynamic is brought out by Patricia herself with, her conversation with Thomas, in the grounds of Crowley's house as well, where she says, I'm an adult. I can do what the hell I want. Really. And I think this is kind of interesting, to be honest, because, Thomas Wayne really does treat his sister with kid gloves a lot. And maybe it is just to protect the reputation and the name of the Wayne family rather than his sister. But I like that that's called out here. And I think the interesting thing is that both Thomas Wayne and Martha Kane both come back to Crowley's house twice here. They're in there. First time, Thomas seemingly happy to allow Patricia to stay, and then they're back again because I suppose they get a feeling, really.
Well, very much it's coming from Martha. Martha's specifically saying to Thomas, as he described, the reason why he left his sister behind was she's happier than she's ever been in her life. And Martha goes, does that not concern you? That should concern you if she's never been happier with her life like this. And we know that this guy is an occultist, is a Satanist. Gotta be some issue there, right? We did mention in the last episode that the character of Aleister Crowley is a true to life figure, an actual real life person who lived only until 1947, but he was an occultist up until then. So this would be something similar to what it would be expected, I suppose, from society, from him as a person. This is the kind of home that he would keep. The way he comes across in the show, the way they've written him here, I really like the idea that he's coming across as kind of a cult leader. This whole thing of obviously, I'm an adult, I can make my own choices. Well, loads of adults have made their own choices to join cults and end off like this thing where they think they're perfectly happy and they're doing things completely against their character, So that's effectively how it's coming across in this show. I do really like that. That's the way they're playing it with Crowley as this cult leader, effectively. So we don't know enough about him as to how he's controlling everybody. What we do know is we've seen Patricia in the past, and we've certainly seen Ripper in the past, both being very different to the characters they are when under the influence of Aleister Crowley. Whether they're better or not really too sure, especially if he's saying, my master is Satan, and they're telling people, come and join our little commune here. Well, probably not a good thing, right?
I mean, it is that cult leader, and the indoctrination and the persuasion to bring them on board. So I like that for sure. And I really do like Thomas Wayne's healthy skepticism of it. And even when Martha Kane is saying, no, his boss is the devil. She believes it after her experience to some extent. She believes she saw this. She recognizes, though, that may make her sound crazy.
Yeah.
But she's saying, I saw this stuff. How? I don't know. Is it in my mind? Maybe. However, there's something going on here. That's why she doesn't trust Crowley. Whereas I think Thomas Wayne's, whilst it's I said a healthy skepticism, maybe it's just a slightly more dismissive skepticism in that, he's dismissing any kind of suggestion here. And the fact that other people believe it, like maybe Jason Ripper, like his sister, that's the more dangerous element here, ultimately. As with any cult, it is the belief, around the story, of the cult members so much as anyone from outside.
Yeah. And before we go on to the obviously big question from the episode of does the devil exist in this show and how, and everything that's going on in Pennyworth about the devil, just a quick aside, our question number 2 is actually a very small question, just because it threw up to me what's going on with Martha. In this episode, we had kind of seen in previous episodes that Martha doesn't know a huge amount about Thomas. She's not really too sure much about him. In this episode, sitting opposite of Aleister Crowley while Thomas is off in the other room, we hear her having this conversation with him, kind of going, you know, the Waynes as a family are bigger than anything you've ever dealt with. They're like their own country. They'll step on you and they'll step on top of entire societies to get what they want. We hear about Thomas saying, you know, it's not just to protect the family name. It's also to protect the FTSE 100 score or the stock market price for our family and our organization and Wayne Enterprises effectively. So it was just interesting to me that suddenly Martha has much more knowledge about the Wayne legacy and the Wayne organization here than she seemed to have in previous episodes.
Yeah, I mean, she's much more knowledgeable about Wayne Enterprises or the corporation, less so about maybe Thomas. I think the other thing I think that's quite good here is that not only does Martha know a lot about the Waynes, but the devil or the master of Crowley knows quite a lot about Thomas Wayne here, and knows that they're both with no name, but that there's a further level of secrecy for Thomas Wayne in that he is also with the CIA trying to undermine effectively both. And I like this idea that, you know, he has this one-upmanship with regards to the knowledge that he holds, even compared to Martha, which makes for a really nice, uncomfortable scene between Martha and Thomas, where he is trying to squirm out of it, and I thought that was really nicely done.
Absolutely, and they also make a very good point there of Patricia in the background going, no, you don't. You don't work for the CIA.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Because you instantly think that he's just gotten the information from Patricia. Of course, you know, his sister knows that he works for the CIA and she's just handed over that information as she joined the cult effectively. But it seems like she didn't even know herself. So I like that they've done that in the background, that you kind of get the idea that Patricia has no idea that this is the depths of her brother, the stuff that she wouldn't know anything about. She just assumes he's this accountant for the Wayne Enterprises organization who follows her around the world, dragging her back from danger. Interestingly, remember back in episode 1 of the show when Thomas went to save his sister effectively, she was also being chased down by other people, right? So it's interesting that she does seem to attract a lot of negative attention, and now she's in league with these cultists as well. So I kind of like that while he is saving his sister, I kind of like the idea of the Wayne family as a kind of almost like a royal legacy, you know, like the old royals from the 1700s, where there's always one that is going against the whole family idea, and somebody has to shut them up and keep them quiet. You know, I kind of like that idea.
She's the Princess Margaret of her time. You know?
Maybe a little earlier than that. I'm thinking much more like, you know, the 1700s, where a member of the royal family.
Princess Margaret was pretty rock and roll. She was kind of the 60s princess, like the Shades and the movie star husbands, and you know, sniff sniff, snort snort.
Don't know anything about recent
lots of gins, probably.
But there you go. It was just a small aside, just about how much Martha seems to know about the Waynes and their legacy, and then how little Patricia seems to know about Thomas as well. I also like the fact that Thomas himself is hiding that idea of him being in the CIA. I thought that was quite interesting. But there's a great question there from Martha to Thomas, where she's going, how can you be so cold about your sister? And he kind of goes, well, practice and discipline. That's one of my favorite little lines in there. Oh yeah, and she also compares the Wayne legacy itself. I think Crowley says that he's been branded a thief by popes and kings, and here he is still surviving when they've all fallen away. And she then goes, well, you've never dealt with someone like the Wayne family before.
Yeah,
so
that was a nice moment, actually, yeah.
That was quite cool. Let's get back to the bigger questions of the episode. Question 3, does the devil exist? Because this is kind of an interesting way they've dealt with it in the show. I was joking, I was talking to someone on Twitter a couple of weeks ago about episode 6 when they introduced the magic element, and when they introduced this Aleister Crowley, the occultist element to the show, and they went, I'm out now, I've watched 5 episodes, really enjoyed those 5 episodes, and then suddenly they depended on occultism and magic, so therefore I'm done with the show. And I was kind of going to them like, but you've watched 5 episodes of the show that you've really enjoyed. How can you suddenly be out when they bring in the occult? Do you not want to wait and find out what they mean by the occult in this show? Does it exist? Does magic exist? And they just said, no, we're done, which I just find amazing. But what I love about this episode is even getting to the end of it, and even with all the crazy, eerie, weird things that are going on, there's absolutely rational explanations. And they've also presented another side to it as well, that if you want to jump onto it and say the devil exists, they've provided something there. But effectively what has happened here, I think, with what Crowley's done with Thomas Wayne is he said to him, the devil's inside of all of us, and I'll find a way to get your devil out, even though you think of yourself as this button-up, upper-class American who can deal with everything. I will push your buttons all the way to get the devil inside out. If I was able to use any song for the opening of this show without getting sued by anybody, it definitely would be In Excess's Devil Inside. That was my opening song.
It is that idea of that everyone has light and everyone has shadow. There is all of that. So I would definitely go with Tippett's Child of Our Time here.
Oh, nice.
As well, at least part of the final movements of that. But I think I think that's what's really good here. I mean, Batman's always had, to an extent, something of the occultist element here. The Court of Owls is a cult. It's worshipping certain things. It might be technology. It might be the devil. Yeah. It could be like the League of Assassins. It is actual magic. It's a magic whirlpool and jacuzzi that brings you back to life ultimately. So it's not something that is new to the Batverse, and it should be here. I think here though as well, there is that kind of magic. There is magic shown to be, or tricks. And you could say, with the Joker, with Batman himself, it's that you're using technology, and you see that here with Crowley using the projector effectively to build the anger, and the venting of that anger in Thomas Wayne. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes a little bit more existentialist as well, where it's like, well, that's what he means, is that everyone has this devil inside them. Everyone has the ability to snap, to go bad, to go evil, or even just to passively join evil, in some way. And I can draw that out depending on who you are. And that's what he does here. I like the fact though, as I said before, this to me feels really nice in this mixed up crazy world of Pennyworth, where you have, the title of the show is Julie Christie, about an icon from the swinging 60s. This to me feels immensely Victorian. I'm a massive fan of Penny Dreadful, the show, and I think this really feels that Victorian element of reconnecting with the occult, with satanic cultist movements from that period, of which Aleister Crowley is part, comes from that era, to some extent. It is this, sort of rebellion against being the prim and proper Victorian, which is always what it's assumed to be. This was the underbelly of that Victorian era, that rebellion against that in, quite high social circles. So this really fits nicely here into the Wayne world, because I think, or Wayne's world, should I say?
No. Oh, no.
Anyway, I will drop that joke. That wasn't very good. But it features nicely, I think, with Wayne World, in that, they are higher society. Yeah. Thomas does come across as a bit of a prude, a bit sort of starched collar, to be honest. He's very serious. He doesn't seem like he can let his hair down. You have the opposite of that here with his sister Patricia, and that feels like she's confined by that starched linen that she has to wear, and she has to escape. And so, what other way then? It's the equivalent of the kids were with their ghetto blasters in the 80s, or whatever. It's that rebellion.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, remember, on both sides of the ocean, you had two big movements going on in the 60s. And in the UK, you had the swinging 60s, the free love era in the UK, but they were rebelling against the majority in society, the straight-laced, stiff upper lip British, effectively. And in the US, you had the other side. You had the hippies, who were another different movement to the swinging 60s movement. They were similar, but they were doing two different things. A lot of free drugs, a lot of free sex in the US in the 60s, and again, they were rebelling against the stiff upper lip type. And I definitely Thomas Wayne is part of the stiff upper lip American side of society, you know? It was only when you were speaking there that I noticed something as well that you mentioned, which is within the Batman mythos, I suppose, if you want to call it that. It's been around for 80 years. I guess you can call it a mythos, right? People do all the time. But you always have the leader of a gang surrounded by other members that will follow them to the nth degree. So we've always had things like Penguin and his gang of followers who are always fighting against Batman and his Bat family, effectively. So what they are setting up within this show, in a very adult way, of course, what they're setting up within the show is always a leader and loads of followers who will buy into everything that the leader is telling them, effectively, you know? So we have Crowley here with his 2 brand new followers who are willing to die for him almost. You know, we see that they're definitely willing to do anything for him. The moment with Ripper lying on the ground, being choked to death almost by Thomas Wayne, is something that you would expect that Ripper would punch back or get himself out of there. But that's the level that Crowley knew Thomas Wayne was going to go to once he found the devil inside him, you know? Yeah,
I thought that was a really great scene, seeing Thomas Wayne lose his cool. Mm-hmm. And as you say, it's that moment where Jason Ripper is like, what has happened to this guy? He is literally accepting it because he knows that he trusts his master, Crowley, who's maybe said he won't kill you. So he's just lying back. Or it's that if he does and he does die, he meets his master's master in the purgatory that is his heaven. Yeah. You know, and goes to the promised land of hell, to be reborn. So this was really, really good. And I must say, I really liked how this was shot and seeing the flashing images on Thomas Wayne's face and him coming back all bloody and messed up and effectively saying, right, we're going now, we're leaving and bringing Patricia, because ultimately, Crowley has gotten in this brief transaction, he's gotten what he wanted. He wants to know that Thomas Wayne has got this devil inside him, this anger. And he's seen that, and now he will allow Patricia to go. You know, in a sense, that something's happened here that he's happy with. He's gotten what he wanted, and now he's got to move to the next bit. So,
and I think it's Thomas revealing that he does have a dark side, even though he proclaims that he doesn't over and over again. He proclaims, I'm not a bad man. I don't have an evil side. Yeah. Yes, Crowley shows him that he does.
And it's really interesting you say that, because as well, you could argue that some of his views on his sister Patricia are pretty dark and ruthless, in that, well, I'm only doing this not really because I care about her, but because I don't want the Wayne stock market price to fall if she does anything stupid, or the reputation. So in a sense, he's not doing anything seemingly out of love, but I'm sure there is that underneath some of this. But some of his explanation to Martha and to Crowley, is actually quite detached, quite cold, quite ruthless.
You get the feeling that if he could cut Patricia loose from the family and it not affect the family name, that he would cut her loose from the family. Yeah. And we do wonder, we talked about it last episode before, about this idea of, we've never heard Patricia Wayne before. You'd wonder if there was an aunt of Bruce Wayne, you would wonder why you hadn't heard of her. And maybe there is an explanation for that coming up in the show. Do want to talk about the footage, the film that's being shown by Ripper to push Thomas Wayne over the edge. I do agree with you. I think it's a really powerful scene, but I'm wondering, is there just stuff in there that we couldn't see because it's being shown on his face? There's things that we couldn't make out. You know, I don't know whether it started out as being Martha Kane in that video because she didn't know what happened to herself for the first 3 days, and then the video ends with Ripper calling out that actually in that scene is his sister. So he's being shown a video of his sister basically in a porn movie, and it's closing down with Ripper going, oh, well, if you haven't had the opportunity to have sex with your own sister, maybe you should. Like, that's a massively offensive thing to say to someone about their sister, you know, absolutely. And you can see why Thomas snaps completely at that moment and wants to kill Ripper as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so he is riled up here. So I think the devil, literally speaking, doesn't exist. Figuratively, with regards to that darkness inside, then absolutely. Yeah. It provides a nice character moment for Thomas Wayne, which I think really was needed. So I must say I've been pleased about this. And it's really helped develop that relationship between Martha and Thomas. I don't think necessarily in a positive way so far. Yeah. I think Martha feels completely and utterly lied to, knowing or hearing the suggestion that he's a member of the CIA trying to undermine the No Name League. I think his view on her as to what she should be doing, she's a very strong woman. Mm-hmm. She's like, I'm not your babysitter. I'm not Patricia's babysitter.
Yeah.
You're adults and you're not believing what I'm saying yet. This is what I felt I saw in that moment, whether it was through drugs or alcohol or whatever, or psychotropic. So, I like this development for sure. And I like that it's not necessarily going in the right way, which is, it certainly looks like these two are far from marriage material as you could possibly think. Again, is that one of the wondrous theories of this that actually it is an espionage cover in Gotham.
No.
Wayne Manor is their front. Wayne Enterprises is their vehicle. Be interesting.
It will be. I hope not. I hope that even if we only get a season 1, that it won't transcend over that as its central concept, that it turns out that Bruce's parents weren't connected, the way they were when he was a young kid. Hopefully. But hey, we'll see how it goes. There's a couple more episodes to go this season. Let's get on to our 4th question of the episode. How will Harwood reveal himself?
He will unbutton his coat and show himself to the world, just like the gremlin in the bar in the Gremlins movie.
Either that or he'll unbutton his coat and take out a biscuit that he's stolen from Gaunt. I really like these scenes with Harwood because he looks like he's come back. We saw last episode that he kind of fell over when he was having thoughts of being fully back to himself. But he leaves Beth behind because she's a little bit too high profile, I suppose, to take to London. Maybe a little bit too overprotective of Harwood. In case somebody says something slightly insulting, she probably would kill them. But he takes Peggy with her down to Gaunt's house to reveal that he is alive and well, but not going to come out of the shadows until some kind of movements have happened. So we have a discussion between these two leaders, I suppose, of the Raven Society. Find a bit more about the Raven Society itself as well, which is quite interesting in this episode as it's going on. It does feel like Gaunt is very happy to see James Harwood. I don't think we had any of those moments where she kind of looks to camera and goes, "Oh no, my whole plan has failed," or anything like that. She tells him quite quickly that she is not the one that ordered the death of Undyne's husband, Justin. She's not the one that ordered that death. So, but everybody seems to be complimenting her. So she's taking some of the compliments, I suppose, as the way that she's saying it. But she seems quite willing to step down as soon as Harwood wants to take over.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I really like the meeting of Harwood and Gaunt. It's not how I initially thought it was going to pan out, actually. I thought this was going to be a moment where Lord Harwood kind of comes back, and I thought it was going to be with the council of the Raven Society there, and he's going to go, well, this was a betrayal. None of you stepped up. None of you came to find me. It was this, former sort of dog's body or servant of mine, Bet Sykes, who ultimately rescued me.
Right.
No one went out searching for me. It was her, and they've rehabilitated, Bet with, her sister. So I thought it was going to sort of be a bit confrontational. I thought Gaunt was probably going to die, or if nothing else, at least be left sniveling, sort of knowing her place, that he was back. But instead, it's actually pared back here, where he's like, no, you still lead the Raven Society. I'm going to keep myself fully hidden until the plan needs to have me revealed. And this is for maximum effect, probably at the right time of when they're about to topple the government here. So I kind of like this. I like the craziness of the Raven Society leadership. Frances Gaunt is slightly wacky. She's got a few quirks to herself. And here, I suppose Lord Harwood, after being on the streets treated like a dog, he's stuffing Jammy Dodger biscuits into his inside pocket for later, I presume. But I thought that was really funny. But I'm glad he didn't kill Frances Gaunt. I'm glad she's still there at the end, delivering that motivational, revolutionary speech to the audience,
Yeah, but I think there's a lot more about the biscuits in the pockets that you're not taking into account. It's a funny little moment, but I think that's where Gaunt's realizing, ooh, maybe this guy is not the one we should all be following.
Full biscuit.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he's not a full box.
He's a jam short of a Jammy Dodger.
Something like that. But I think the one thing you're missing about him taking the biscuits and putting in the pocket is the reaction of Gaunt to that. When he arrived back, she goes, "Oh, great to see you. maybe we should get you out of the country as quickly as possible so you stay alive because, the government are after you. The Prime Minister tried to kill you. Maybe we can get you off to our friends over in the German camp, the people that we're working with. Should we send them off there? And then she sees him making this speech and saying, once I'll crush Britain under my boot. Once we have the leadership, I will take my place in the light and I will come to the forefront. And then she kind of has that moment where she's looking at him going, not too sure whether you're a full packet of sandwiches there, mate. Not really
absolutely.
too sure. So I think there's a little bit more there. Remember we did talk about it before back in episode 2, I think. There was a moment on the TV screens where we hear about the Germans and there is still a Reich ongoing, potentially still Nazism ongoing. So if the Raven Society align themselves with the Nazis, would make sense with the symbol that they've chosen for the Raven Society as well.
Definitely. I mean, again, I think with Lord Harwood, and I think this does kind of lead into question 5 a bit. It's a connective part to question 4 and question 5. How will Lord Harwood reveal himself? You're saying there that maybe he's a little, off the edge, and Francis doesn't fully, trust him because it seems like he's been damaged by his time, at the hands of, the barber and the torture that was put on him.
And the Prime Minister and the Queen, basically.
But the thing is, he is still getting information from somewhere and he still has some kind of network because we do have this moment where, back at, the Sykes house, he's doing the toenails of Peggy in a nice pink, which again, could certainly confirm Francis Gaunt's, theory that he's slightly losing it. But then he provides the information to Bet Sykes that he knows who, and where to get, the killer of Esme, who is very much important. And he knows that she has an importance to Bet Sykes. So, where's this information coming from? Is it that he still has his channels, or he's still got the ear of maybe John Ripper? Because I don't think it's Francis. And I think this leads us on to question 5, with what Bet does with that information, with the information coming out of the Fusiliers Club for Alfred, where was Captain Curzon going all dolled up, escaping from Alfred and his gun? At least that is the first thing. But what I like about this moment is I think it's really nicely shot, with the misty streets of London. I like the chase across the rooftops, but I do like, even though it seems a little, unceremonious in some respects, I do like the fact that we have Alfred and, Bet Sykes in the same location. And I'm just wondering, is this some kind of weird team up that is probably going to happen here?
Absolutely.
With the two of them trying to track down, Esme's killer because of how much she meant to the both of them. And so I thought this was really nicely done. I liked, Bazza and, Davy Boy as well, helping Alfred, to find out this information about Captain Curzon. What's he doing? Going to the Fusiliers Club, to, the officers club to find out if they know anything about Curzon. And I like that it all ultimately trickled down into this meeting of both, Bet Sykes and Alfred Pennyworth. Unfortunately, Curzon manages to escape, but I think Davy Boy says it all, actually. And I think it's kind of one of those things hidden in plain sight a bit where, all you did was make a joke. So why is he taking, this vengeance to the extreme of killing Esme to get back at you? Now, Alfred says the joke is on me. And okay, maybe it is, but I think Davy Boy has a point here. And this is why I am still fairly, and I think this is still why I'm firmly of the view that this is Curzon being used or being manipulated, or something else, and that someone else is behind all of this, and indeed Esme's death.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think we hear from the cleaner that she comes over to clean up the house 2 days a week. She doesn't go into any room other than the main reception area, effectively, and he just dresses up in his gear and goes out to the Fusiliers Club. So it doesn't seem like he has much of a life, doesn't seem like he has much of a job. anything like that. So perhaps he's been paid off by somebody to kill Esme, and that's why he doesn't seem to have anything else going on. The fact that he's hiding out in what looks like some form of hospital for former veterans is what it seems like.
The almshouses. It's kind of like charity. It's when the Queen, you have Alms Day where the Queen gives alms, ALMS rather than ARMS, even though it does sound the same.
No, she doesn't give bombs to poor people. No.
Where it's a symbolic kind of purse of money that the royalty used to give out in church, and so the alms housing is kind of, it's the I suppose the give back from the army to its soldiers and officers where maybe they have been injured in action or fallen on bad times to some extent. So it does. It feels like he is a pawn in this game of chess, and he's being used. It's a question of who is he being used by, and again, I'm still backing the theory of John Ripper and the No Name League.
Well, I think, the fact that the question that was asked of Alfred Pennyworth in the past was, who would do this to you? Who would hate you this much that they'd want to do something this bad to you, effectively? So either Alfred's misremembering what he did to Captain Curzon earlier on in his time in the war. Potentially that's something as well. There's possibility that things have gone missing from Alfred's memory. Or it is somebody else that's using this very tenuous connection between the two. And this is the only thing that Alfred could think of, is that time that he slagged him off in front of his company and embarrassed him in front of his company. So there's one of those two things. It has to be that, right? But I feel definitely the fact that they keep underlining it was only a joke, or it was only that one time that you said something. Nobody else really even remembers it. I wouldn't think of Captain Curzon in a bad way at all, just because of that one little joke that you made, kind of thing. So because they keep underlining it, that makes me think you're right, John, that he's been paid off to kill Esme on behalf of somebody else. That will be a big reveal in the future. So intriguing. I do like the little touch that they find the engagement ring of Esme
that was nice.
as a medal on his uniforming. That's a really good touch. I also love the conversation between Alfred and his mom and dad, because they haven't been able to get through to Alfred for a few weeks at this stage. And finally we get that moment of how butlering can help out. Effectively, this is how you reshine a diamond on an engagement ring. I've done it for many people in the past. Trust me,
Yeah, I thought that was really nice with the Lady Faltingrass use by his dad to polish up her diamond. And I think, whilst Alfred's cleaning the ring of Esme, I thought that was really nice. And I was there going, I'm really starting to like his mum and dad here. They're really nice. And then what do we see? Only, his dad at, the fascist right-wingers Raven Society, sort of inspirational speech from Frances Gaunt.
Well, yes, where she says that foreigners aren't our friends, they will be expelled from our country, sexual deviants will be killed, and thieves will be hanged. This is a totally Nazi-ish speech coming from the Raven Society. We haven't really heard much about their beliefs in the past, just a very simple, that one's fascist and the other one's communist, effectively. That's all we've really heard about the details. But once you get a big speech, a rallying point, and she's making these kind of statements and saying potentially that the Germans will take in Harwood, you're kind of going, oh, this is the Nazi League, or the Nazi Society in the UK is actually the Raven Society. That's what we're getting here. It's a much more oppressive group than you would have seen in the past. So an interesting one to end off. Obviously massively interesting that Alfred's father is in that group.
Definitely.
And Alfred is very much closer to the No Name Society in the dealings he's had in the past with Martha and with Thomas Wayne as well. So potentially this could be dividing an entire household, but dividing the Pennyworth household between the two societies.
Yeah,
so,
it'd be interesting how it plays out for sure.
Yeah. That's it for our top 5 questions from the episode. A couple of things just that stood out in this particular episode. Love that overhead shot at the beginning of the episode as Martha's returning home.
Fantastic.
During rush hour, during the rat race, effectively. All the men going off to work as Martha, wrapped in a sheet, is walking back through them back to her
really
home.
nicely done.
And that was really cool.
That. Yeah.
Also, the scarecrows on the way to Dr. Gaunt's house. We pointed out the scarecrows before, that the production designers at Cosa FX, who did the visual effects for the show, were specifically saying that the reason why they chose scarecrows in the fields, the way that they chose them and the style that they chose, was because of the Batman villain Scarecrow. You can definitely see that in the 2 or 3 scarecrows on the way to Gaunt's house. They definitely look very like a scarecrow from Gotham.
And also the hallucination at Crowley's house. You know, you could have this idea. It's some kind of prototype gas that's filtered into the room, not just simply hallucinogenic drugs.
A little fear gas.
Yes.
Potentially. Speaking of Crowley's house, I know I had to point this one out to you when we watched the episode a second time.
And then I saw it.
Once again, a pram with pigs going by in the foreground.
What is going on?
As Martha and Thomas return to the house, the second time they're going back, in case you want to find it, the pigs going past in a pram. So it's the second one we saw, the mask of someone wearing a pig mask in a previous episode. And this time we see pigs going by in a pram.
Yes. What the piggy wiggy is going on here? There is certainly a pig theme.
There is.
For sure going on. I have to say, that moment was weird for me, and not just purely because of the pigs in a pram, but it was the fact that when Martha says she's going after Patricia, they kind of go straight up to the front door and ring the front doorbell. I thought they were going to kind of like sneak in the back door or sneak in maybe a window on the first or second floor or whatever to try and, you know, kind of surreptitiously rescue her and bring her out rather than kind of confront Crowley.
Still polite society, John. Always ring the front door.
So it seemed a little on the front door to me. But certainly then, pigs in a pram. I suppose it's Crowley's house. Who knows what happened to those pigs? Maybe for his next kind of seance.
How else are you going to carry your pigs around London, you know? I'm sure George Clooney has, with his pot-bellied pigs, he probably has a pram for them as well.
Well, yeah.
Pot-bellied pig pram is a very difficult thing to say.
Pot-bellied pig pram.
We will definitely leave it there. John, how would you rate this episode of Pennyworth?
I would give this episode 4 pigs in a pram out of 5. It has to be pigs in a pram because it was the weirdest part of this.
It certainly was.
For me, I really liked Thomas and Martha sort of interacting here, and through the vehicle of Crowley and Patricia. I thought it was nicely done. You know, actually, Alfred took a relative back seat really in this episode. But however, I liked how they chugged that along, and certainly with the meeting of Bet Sykes and Alfred, I thought it was a little unceremonious. I thought like he would maybe have a bit more of a surprise given you know, their previous meeting, but it all seemed a little matter of fact and we'll all help one another to, you know, get the guy who killed Esme.
Well, he does go, you're dead, aren't you?
Well,
like,
exactly.
No, I'm not.
But
I'm
no,
back.
it does, I don't know whether there was more of a punch or a packing of a punch that I was expecting there. But I like the fact that happened. I love that chase scene over the roof, through the windows, in the misty streets of London. I thought that was nicely done. The old disappear by bus trick. You know, did he catch the bus? Did he hang on to the outside? Did he get on board? Did he go down a manhole cover? Did he climb through a window? Who knows?
And I was thinking about this because remember, buses back in the 60s were very different to the way they were when we were young. You could just hop on the back because they had the bar hanging off and an open door at the back, which is different now. Obviously, the bus has to stop and the doors have to open, but you absolutely could have jumped onto the bus, definitely. So, should point that out.
So I really liked all of this and how it played out. I think there's more to know about Crowley and what's happening, and I think that I felt some of that was just missing a bit from this episode. But I like that we saw Thomas and Martha Wayne's relationship develop, and in some ways not in a good way.
I know what you mean.
So I thought this was good. And yes, that opening shot of her walking against the tide of maledom, I thought was really, really good. Yeah. Her in the white sheet, you know, a few faces turning. I thought the overhead and from down below where you have the factory scenes. I thought there was really, really some nice direction here. So really like this episode. A little investigative, a little procedural in parts, but I thought it was nicely done. And of course, who doesn't like an episode that chucks pigs in a pram for no reason? Or is there a reason?
There might be. I'm wondering if we're going to see a bit more of Jack Ripper in the future as well, because I feel like his change of character is so massive from what we saw of him in episode 2. We've only got 3 episodes left of the season. I'm hoping that we're going to see why did he change? You know, what is the reason he's here? After what happened to him in episode 2 in Landlord's Daughter, I was kind of expecting a big standoff when he returned to London, but seeing that he's back here and just kind of living the party lifestyle, being called My Angel by Aleister Crowley just seems so odd and out there. Almost as odd as Pigs in a Pram. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Pennyworth Podcast, episode 7, Julie Christie. We'll be back next Monday with our review of episode 8 entitled Sandy Shaw. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast over on tvpodcastindustries.com. We're currently talking about The Boys as well. We have episodes of The Boys coming out every week on Wednesday, but Pennyworth comes out on Monday every week as we get through the rest of the season.
Yeah, thank you so much, governors, for listening. As always, it has been a pleasure. I'm off to go and get some bacon, because yes, Pigs in a Pram got me thinking of bacon butties, and certainly the old mouth started to water. So, oink oink, speak with you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.